Asked today to give you a national picture, a bit of an understanding about how Australians across the board are feeling about the economy. And we regularly do reports on the mind and mood of Australians and particular topics, and we spend time with particular segments of the community. But the insights that I'm going to share with you today have come off the back of a report that we did in October called Mind and Mood. We deviate a little bit from our traditional way of doing research. We conduct our research with affinity groups, friendship groups, people who know each other very well, in home, and we use an undirected method. So we don't really ask them a whole lot of specific questions. We just say, what have you been talking about in your across the kitchen table, at barbecues, at workplaces, and so forth. What we decided to do to focus the mind a little bit, focus the mind of participants at the end of the very free-flowing discussion that we had for that mind and mood research, is we said to them, how are you feeling about the economy today? Not just the global, not just the national economy, but your own economic situation today compared to how you were feeling 12 months ago. So we wanted to get them to talk specifically about the economy. And a lot of the insights that we got from that response from our groups really confirmed what we've been getting for the previous 18 months, and so I'm going to share some elements of that with you now. So one of the things we found coming out of the research was an immediate connection between how people are feeling about the economy and their dissatisfaction with political leadership. Interestingly, the stimulus question that we gave groups was not how are you feeling about politics, it was how you're feeling about the economy. We didn't even mention leadership or politics, but they went immediately there and they talked about how unhappy they were feeling with the national leadership. There was also some comments made about, particularly in Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria, mainly about kind of cuts to public sector jobs and so forth. But really it was about that national leadership, and of course there's been dissatisfaction with the federal government for some time, but really this is the first report where people were feeling that a change of government wouldn't necessarily be that great either. So we have a very kind of trapped, grumpy electorate, and linking that kind of sense of anxiousness about the future with also a frustration about lack of political vision about where the Australian economy might head. Interestingly, we did get a discussion in the groups about the perspective that you have on the economy does matter. So that kind of sense of attitude counts. And that came very much out of a broader discussion about recognising that Australia was better off than a lot of other countries. And in the video that you saw, that was reflected in the comments by the young teacher, Tom, who said, well, look, Victoria's probably not doing as well as the rest of Australia, but globally we seem to be doing okay. And so we did have people say, amongst the gloom and doom, perhaps we need to look at our attitude and how we approach the economy and that kind of lens that we approach it in terms of how we feel. I love this quote, that kind of, the whole global economy is like a hospital. Europe's on life support, the US is in the general ward, and Australia is in the ward for hypochondriacs. So we do have people recognising that perhaps Australians are taking on the role of global whingers, perhaps with a bit too much enthusiasm, and that I take out of that a real hunger and a desire amongst Australians for effective national cheerleaders, for a story about the Australian economy and society that's a positive one. And due to the relentless negativity, both of the media and politics, and I've got to say, instead some of the silence or lack of leadership we even get from our business leaders, they're kind of grasping around to see, well, who's there telling the positive, optimistic story about where a nation's going, one that I can believe. One of the biggest complaints, and even the day that there isn't a poll or a story in the media about cost of living issues, and we are getting a lot from our groups about anxiety around wages not keeping a pace with cost of living, that CPI just kind of doesn't cut it anymore. And of course, in terms of the cost of living issues that people look at, certainly utility prices have been a big one in the last 18 months, but really they're up there in a longer shopping list of anxiety around cost of living increases, which would include education fees, even things like local council rates, Food and petrol less so than perhaps 2 years ago, but it's there, it's still there. You know, all it takes is bananas become expensive. You know, we talk about in our group the banana index. As soon as bananas get to $12 a kilo, everybody's kind of going on about, you'd think we were a nation who just ate bananas, but you know, every time bananas go up, everybody has a kind of panic about grocery costs. So that kind of whole idea of the wage keeping a pace with cost of living was another big conversation. You know, people are noticing, and have for some time, the extent to which the retail environment in Australia is depressed, being hit by the combination of internet shopping, but also generally the general more cautious consumer. Now, of course, not all retail is depressed. You know, if you can't walk a block without tripping over a chocolate store, but if you're running a clothing store, a footwear store, or other ones, you're in a lot more trouble. So some parts of retail are doing very well and others aren't. But generally, people are looking at what's happening in the retail sector as well as other sectors that have traditionally employed people and worrying about the extent to which that's going to lead to significant job losses. And of course, part of that is making people feel a bit depressed when they go into the retail environment. So we often talk to people who say, you know, you go to the local shopping centre and shops are closing down, they're constantly on sale. It kind of adds this general sense of pessimism and concern. Yes, so the whole idea of the role of China in our economy, and particularly the role of China in certain parts of the economy, is something that we've seen pop up at different times for the last 4 years. And, you know, Australians' feelings about China have always been historically mixed. You know, we kind of say that it's not so much Reds under the bed, it's Reds selling me stuff now, Reds at the cash register or Reds at the dairy farm. So there is a concern about China's, the role of China in certain kinds of industries, particularly agricultural industries. It's a mixed feeling about the role of China ongoing as well, the extent to which our relationship with them. And there's a general acceptance amongst Australians that it's our most important strategic relationship as well as economic relationship, that we need to understand and know more about China, but there is fear and anxiousness laced, kind of connected with that recognition as well. I talked a little bit about this before, just kind of gestured towards this kind of idea about changing attitudes to the mining industry and to the resources boom. We've seen over a relatively short period of time, I must say 4.5 years, of Australians going from saying, isn't it great that we've got this mining boom, it's going to last for another 3 or 4 decades, to there is no mining boom anymore, it's over. What are we going to do? We don't have a manufacturing industry, we don't have retail, we don't have, with declining standards in other industries, and we're worried. So we've really seen attitudes to the Australian economy, and particularly national leadership, connected quite strongly with changing attitudes to the mining boom. And certainly a lot of scepticism about the extent to which the mining boom can really provide enough job opportunities to make up for the deficit in those industries that are also failing. In terms of concerns and the kinds of people that the kinds of causes that people look at, what's creating some of this anxiety, what are the kinds of things that people like to blame. I do have to say that Australians generally blame politicians for the reason why things aren't going so well for us, and the concerns that they have, particularly for the future. But, asylum seekers are always there to some extent across groups, as they're like the dole bludgers of our times. You go back to the reports that Hugh Mackay wrote in the 80s, and dole bludgers were constantly being criticised for being a drain on the public purse. Now it's asylum seekers, and it is something that comes up quite regularly, in our research as well. Again, kind of connected to this comment that I was making in terms of the mining boom, there is this sense that we're living in a two-speed economy, and most of the people that we talk to feel they live in the part of the economy that's grinding to a halt. I am interested to see the media reports this week in anticipation of a rate cut and a series of rate cuts that will go into a year of relatively low interest rates. There's almost a kind of escalating opinion, both from business leaders and to some extent politicians, that the Australian economy isn't failing, but it is flattening. There aren't a lot of creation of necessarily new opportunities, and growth has slowed down. And that's something that a story that we've been hearing anecdotally for some time. And so Australians are really feeling like haven't really bought that isn't Australia doing great, aren't we really prosperous, we should feel really happy, because they've felt like they're in the part of the economy that isn't benefiting as well or as directly as other parts. I think that two-speed economy concept, we're going to see that drop in the next 12 to 18 months, and I think that we have a one-speed economy and the speed of the economy is slow, or flat at least.